Welcome to Trending Unpacked, the show where we explore the stories behind the trends shaping our world. Today, we are strapping in for, well, a really high-stakes return. A massive cultural moment that has generated global buzz and, let's be honest, a massive amount of social media side-eye.
We are talking about the monumental return of the Victoria's Secret fashion show, slated for 2025. And this is, it's far more than just resurrecting an event. It's really a cultural event that signals just how much the world of fashion, beauty, and maybe corporate responsibility has changed since the show last aired.
Absolutely. The sources we've looked at, they paint a very clear picture here. This is a brand really attempting to rewrite its own narrative, moving away from that pure spectacle defined by the sort of mythological angels to an attempted statement defined by inclusion and, well, empowerment. So our mission today is to analyze this huge amount of material we have, trying to figure out if this comeback is a genuine evolutionary reset, or is it merely a highly calculated commercial strategy just designed for profit recovery?
It really is the ultimate corporate redemption arc playing out in public, isn't it? And what's fascinating here, I think, is that the sources give us the tools to weigh that genuine philosophical shift against the clear necessity of, well, market survival. Whether or not this actually succeeds, it offers a profound look at what today's consumer demands from a big established global brand, especially one that previously, let's face it, thrived on exclusion.
Okay, so let's unpack this journey, because to understand the necessity, maybe, of the 2025 version, we really have to look at the spectacular high and then the dramatic defining low of the original show. Right, let's start with the era of fantasy, an era that, it truly defined aspirational viewing for, 2 decades?
Easily.
The Victoria's Secret fashion show first hit the scene back in 1995, and pretty quickly, it wasn't just a retail presentation anymore, was it?
No, not at all. It became this huge cultural phenomenon, almost synonymous with that 2000 supermodel status. It just ascended incredibly fast, establishing itself as really the single most watched fashion spectacle globally. Broadcast in 190 countries at its peak. That's huge.
Wow.
This wasn't just about selling clothes. This was pop culture iconography. Think of it as peak, almost aggressive maximalism, where fashion met celebrity, met, unattainable glamour.
And right at the heart of that identity were the angels. Supermodels like Tyra Banks, Gisela Bündchen, Adriana Lima. They were given actual feathered wings.
Yeah, the wing.
They weren't just models. They were presented as these muses, embodying a very specific, almost mythological ideal of female beauty.
Tall, slender, very polished.
Exactly.
And that aesthetic, it just completely defined the brand. Glamour, fantasy, aspiration, and exclusivity. That was key. And the sources point out one of the most effective, if maybe extravagant, marketing tactics. The annual fantasy bra.
Yes. The fantasy bra. Every year, this is the centerpiece, right? A bra just dripping with jewels, sometimes worth millions of dollars. Beyond the sheer spectacle, what was the real function of, a $5 million piece of lingerie?
Well, its function was pure nonstop publicity. Simple as that. The sources are pretty clear. The fantasy bra wasn't primarily a sales tool. Nobody was really expected to buy it. It was a media tool. It generated global headlines year after year. It elevated whichever model was chosen to wear it to this kind of elite status. And it anchored the entire show in this realm of absolute luxury and, frankly, unattainability.
It established the brand as being not just about underwear, but about ultra-high glamour.
Exactly. That financial mechanism, spend millions on a spectacle to drive billions in brand association, it worked flawlessly for years.
But as you mentioned earlier, that very singular, very successful definition of beauty, it contained the inherent flaw, didn't it?
Yeah.
The thing that would eventually lead to its, dramatic implosion.
That's precisely right, the core critique. And it started as kind of a whisper, in fascio circles. But by the mid-2010s, it became this unavoidable roar. It was that the show promoted profoundly unrealistic body standards, just one type of body.
Right.
By maintaining this singular ideal of glamour and fantasy, the brand implicitly and later explicitly excluded the vast majority of consumer body types. And backgrounds and identities, too.
That kind of singular fantasy, well, by definition, it excluded most people.
Yeah, and it made many, many people feel inadequate. That was the feedback starting to build. Hashtag 2.2, the cancellation and cultural scrutiny, 2018.
Which brings us neatly, if maybe painfully for the brand, to 2018.
Right.
And the ultimate turning point, the cancellation of the show. And this wasn't just like a dip in ratings or sales forcing a break.
No.
This felt like a hard stop,
Yeah.
driven by massive external and internal pressures.
Yeah, you can absolutely pinpoint the cancellation in 2018 as being directly correlated with and certainly intensified by these broader social movements sweeping the globe.
Right.
Specifically, the sources heavily emphasized the role of the #MeToo movement. That movement created this climate where corporate culture, especially how women were presented, and how executives spoke about women, both internally and externally, it all came under this intense, unforgiving scrutiny.
It was like society suddenly held up this giant magnifying glass.
Yeah,
right.
great.
And the old guard at Victoria's Secret, well, they didn't fare too well under that lens.
Not at all.
And the sources highlight that the backlash wasn't just vague grumbling. It was specific.
Yeah.
And fueled by, frankly, executive arrogance.
Indeed. The specific reasons for the brand's rapid downfall are cited really clearly in the materials we looked at. First, there was the visible lack of diversity on the runway year after year.
No plus-size models, no transgender models.
Right. And then that was compounded by these incredibly tone-deaf and, just outdated comments from key executives.
Probably should bring up that specific executive failure here, shouldn't we?
Yeah, it was pretty defining.
We saw those direct quotes where a former chief marketing officer, Ed Razek, when he was asked about incorporating models of different sizes or transgender women.
He was quoted saying things like, "No, I don't think we should, because the show is a fantasy. It's a 42-minute entertainment special."
Those comments. Wow. They weren't just minor PR blips, were they?
Not at all.
They were definitive statements that the brand was fundamentally unwilling, or maybe unable, to adapt to the modern cultural landscape. They really solidified the perception that the brand was just stuck in this outdated, exclusive paradigm.
And the market reaction was swift.
Oh, yeah. Swift and brutal. Our sources note a very clear correlation between that cultural backlash and a steep decline in sales. And at the same time, market share was being aggressively seized by competitors.
Competitors who did embrace inclusivity.
Exactly. So cultural irrelevance very quickly became commercial failure. And that forced the cancellation. There wasn't much choice left. Hashtag take point 3, the rebrand, and the 2025 format.
Okay, so if the collapse was rooted in that lack of diversity and the tone deafness, the rebrand logically had to be a complete 180-degree turn, right?
Had to be. The sources suggest the brand maybe tried some unspecified, perhaps half-hearted rebrands before. Things that didn't quite land.
Yeah, little tweaks, like trying to swap out the wings for more everyday looks, maybe. It wasn't enough.
Right, before landing on this much more dramatic, much more comprehensive 2025 strategy.
Yeah, the 2025 effort, it isn't just a simple reboot. It feels more like an intellectual and structural dismantling of the old model. And it seems initiated by new corporate leadership, which is probably key. The core shift is explicit now. The new show, the new brand messaging, it focuses entirely on inclusivity and empowerment.
That's the language?
That is the language the market is demanding, yes. And the vehicle for this shift appears to be the VS Collective.
Okay, let's define the VS Collective for anyone listening who isn't familiar. This initiative, it represents the core of the new strategy, correct?
Yeah, it does, yes. The VS Collective basically replaced the old concept of the angels. It's framed as an ongoing collaboration featuring women who are leaders, activists, athletes, people chosen more for their achievements and their impact, not just their physical appearance in that traditional VS mold.
Right.
And the sources highlight that by associating the brand with women known for substance, like Megan Rapinoe or Priyanka Chopra Jonas, they are explicitly trying to, essentially purchase credibility in that empowerment space. They need that association.
Okay, so that immediately frames the key changes we're expecting in the presentation for the 2025 show. First and foremost, the representation on the runway itself has to be fundamentally different.
Absolutely.
We're talking about featuring models of different sizes, different backgrounds, and importantly, different gender identities.
That move, the inclusion of diverse gender identities and body types, that's particularly critical, I think. It's a very necessary, very public acknowledgement that the monolithic angel ideal is dead. It has to be. But the changes seem to go beyond just the casting. They're heavily emphasizing creative collaborations, too, with female artists, designers, filmmakers, integrating their work into the event itself, trying to move the focus from just pure aesthetics to creative merit and storytelling.
And the format itself is changing, too, which you touched on. This is perhaps the most strategic shift of all.
Seems like it.
This isn't just models walking down a shiny catwalk anymore, is it?
No.
The sources detail a shift away from that traditional runway spectacle towards a documentary-style format.
Yeah, that's the term they're using.
That blends the runway display with focused storytelling. What does that actually look like in practice, do you think?
Well, it likely means the show will feature segments, maybe short films or interviews that showcase the model's personal journeys, perhaps, or the creative process behind the garments,
Okay.
or maybe highlighting the social messages embedded in these new collaborations. So it's not aiming to be a 40-minute parade of perceived perfection anymore.
Right.
It's being positioned as a piece of multimedia content designed to feel more grounded, more authentic.
That word again?
Exactly. The narrative element, the storytelling, that seems to be the bridge they're building, attempting to connect the brand's new mission, its new stated values, to the actual clothing, trying to make the viewer feel invested in the message, not just the old fantasy.
So the new marketing language driving all the promotion is incredibly precise then. Authenticity, body confidence, female leadership.
Very deliberate.
By moving from fantasy to authenticity, the brand is trying to align itself directly with the values of modern consumers. Consumers who are, let's face it, pretty skeptical of polished, homogenous perfection these days.
Totally. It's a deliberate, highly calculated repositioning. The brand is essentially telling the world, look, we were wrong, we listened, and now we are a cultural event about empowerment and progress. Instead of simply being a high-fashion spectacle that was arguably designed primarily for the male days, it's a bid for a complete break from that problematic past.
But of course, the internet has thoughts. Many, many thoughts about how genuine all this actually is.
Oh, yes, it does. #tag3. Internet theories and cultural interpretations.
And that's where the conversation gets really interesting, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because the public is deeply divided on this. The moment the comeback was announced, the online debates just exploded. And they seem centered on one main question. Is this genuine, deep-rooted change? Or is it just, a calculated marketing strategy? Purely transactional.
This is the ultimate corporate trust issue playing out in real time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's maybe start with the perspective that holds out some hope. We could call it the redemption arc theory.
Okay.
Many viewers, perhaps especially those who grew up appreciating the original Glamour but now recognize the flaws, they seem to see the 2025 comeback as a crucial test. They acknowledge the pressure, the market forces, but they want to see if the brand can genuinely evolve. Can it move beyond its problematic history?
Right. So this perspective relies on the idea that institutions, even massive corporations, can change, especially when they're financially compelled to. And that maybe this change, once it's enacted, could actually become sustainable.
Potentially.
For people holding on to this theory, the depth of the VS Collective's involvement, the shift in format, that's maybe proof of real effort.
That's the hope, yeah.
But I have to ask, isn't the shift to authenticity just, a new, maybe harder to achieve form of aspirational branding? Does selling realness automatically make it real? Do the sources indicate any widespread consumer belief that this change is more than skin deep?
That is precisely the friction point. And honestly, the data seems pretty mixed on that. While some definitely appreciate the effort, the sources show a huge contingent of skepticism out there. Just huge.
Okay.
And that leads us directly to the opposing and very critical viewpoint, the commercial strategy theory.
Which argues?
This theory views the entire rebrand as purely transactional, just a necessary maneuver for profit recovery and regaining cultural relevance. Nothing more profound than that.
So the critics are arguing that all these moves, the diversity push, the inclusion of storytelling, the partnerships with female artists, it's nothing more than adopting the current cultural mandate.
Because the old way stopped working.
Right. Because their exclusionary model was no longer profitable.
Exactly. This view raises a really vital question about corporate authenticity, especially in this kind of post-trust world we live in.
Yeah.
When a company that literally built its empire on exclusion suddenly turns around and champions inclusion, well, consumers are inherently suspicious of the motives, aren't they?
Understandably so.
Are they genuinely committed to diversity now? Or are they just chasing the consumer dollars that are now flowing towards companies like Savage X Fenty or Aerie?
Companies that built their success foundationally on inclusivity from the get-go.
Precisely. Victoria's Secret didn't choose this path proactively. The market, the culture, it forced it upon them.
That competition factor is so crucial here, isn't it?
Absolutely crucial context.
Brands like Savage X Fenty, Aerie, even Skims to some extent, they succeeded by making diversity and accessibility the core of their ethos from day one.
Not as a reactive rebrand after a fall from grace.
Exactly. So VS's return isn't happening in a vacuum. It's happening on a playing field that's already been defined, in many ways, by its competitors' success.
And this just highlights why transparency is going to be absolutely paramount for them. The critique suggests that if Victoria's Secret wants this redemption arc to actually stick, they have to prove the change is structural. meaning it has to be visible in their supply chain, in their executive suites, in their actual product range and sizing,
Right.
not just on the runway for 40 minutes once a year.
Right. It has to be more than just a show. Hashtag tag 3.2 nostalgia versus progress, the generational divide.
And you know, this whole debate, it often seems to break down along generational lines.
Ah, okay. Which leads us to that dynamic of nostalgia versus progress. Tell us about that.
Well, we see a really clear, almost painful generational divide here in the commentary online and in the sources. Older audiences, you know, those who grew up in the 2000s heyday of the show, they often express this deep nostalgia for the old glamour, for the extravagance, the fantasy, the sheer spectacle that the angels represented.
For them, the original show was just untouchable pop culture, wasn't it?
Totally. Linked to maybe a simpler, albeit definitely flawed, era of media consumption.
That pull of nostalgia is powerful, though, because it often relates back to their own youth, the ideals of that time.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily view the lack of diversity back then as like a moral failure in the same way younger people might. Perhaps more like a historical aesthetic choice.
Possibly. Or maybe just something they didn't focus on as much then.
They just missed the drama, the sheer production value of that multi-million-dollar show.
Right. Now contrast that perspective sharply with younger viewers, particularly Gen Z. They simply do not share that nostalgia at all. For this audience, the lack of diversity in the old show isn't some minor flaw you overlook for the glamour. It's seen as a non-negotiable moral and ethical failure that defined the brand negatively for years.
Their priorities are just fundamentally different.
Completely. They prioritize representation, body positivity, gender inclusivity,
Yeah.
way over the traditional, singular, often unattainable idea of fantasy.
So the younger generation views beauty ideals fundamentally differently. It makes sense. They've been shaped by, and often they're actively driving, these social movements demanding corporate accountability.
Exactly.
Our sources suggest that to Gen Z, a brand that doesn't reflect the authentic diversity of the world, it's just irrelevant. Or worse, it's toxic.
The nostalgia for those hyper-specific, unrealistic body standards just doesn't resonate at all when authenticity is the ultimate cultural currency for them. So this generational shift itself becomes a really powerful lens. We could call it the cultural reflection theory. The entire comeback attempt, the debate around it, it highlights how rapidly beauty ideals are evolving. And evolving in direct tandem with major social and political movements.
So Victoria's Secret is essentially just mirroring what society has already decided is valuable now.
Pretty much. The failure of the original show, you could argue, is a reflection of the maybe toxic beauty standards of the 90s and 2000s.
And the 2025 attempt
Is a reflection of the 2020s mandate. Fluid, diverse, focused on self-acceptance, maybe even mental well-being, alongside physical appearance.
That's a great way to put it. Victoria's Secret isn't leading the change here.
Not at all.
They are desperately trying to catch up to the change that was already happening culturally and ethically around them.
Yeah. The market, which is increasingly defined by these younger, more discerning consumers, they decided what needed to change long before the executives finally seemed to get the memo. Hashtag 4, analysis and takeaway. Hashtag 4.1, the test of evolution.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. What does this all mean at the end of the day? If we put the old fantasy version right next to this new authenticity version, what is the biggest takeaway here about the consumer relationship with fashion, with gender, in the modern era? What does it tell you?
Well, the shift from prioritizing fantasy, which, you know, by its very definition implies something unrealistic, something unattainable,
Right.
to marketing authenticity, which suggests transparency, self-acceptance, reality. It tells us that the consumer relationship with fashion has fundamentally matured, or at least it's demanding maturity from brands.
How so?
The old relationship, you could argue, was predicated on selling inadequacy, making you feel like you needed this product to be closer to that ideal.
Okay.
The new relationship seems predicated on demanding validation and connection. Consumers want to see themselves reflected, feel understood.
So fantasy was about escaping reality. Authenticity is about validating reality. Is that fair?
I think that's a pretty good summary, yeah. The brand's entire ethos had to flip, from aspirational exclusion to accessible inclusion.
And this transformation, it just illustrates that the rebrand was absolutely culturally compelled, wasn't it?
Oh, 100%. This wasn't some internal epiphany they decided to pursue at their leisure over coffee one morning.
No.
It was an external mandate, driven by shifting public values, by social media pressure, and critically, by plummeting sales figures.
Right. The bottom line talks.
Always. The sources make it crystal clear that the only viable path forward for Victoria's Secret was to address its monumental failures head-on. That lack of diversity, the tone-deaf corporate messaging, they had to embrace the social movements defining the modern era.
To fail to do so would just guarantee continued commercial failure, wouldn't it? And cultural erasure.
Absolutely. This wasn't really an option for them. It was a necessity for survival, pure and simple.
It also gives us, as observers, a really great benchmark for evaluating corporate attempts at, well, at healing, maybe, or at least at changing.
That's right.
If they truly succeed in embedding this change long term, they might prove that a deeply entrenched corporate culture can actually change, even one built on something so specific. But if they fail, or if it feels superficial,
then it just confirms the suspicion that this was always just a cynical ploy, a way to try and capture market share lost to genuinely inclusive brands. Hashtag, tag 4.2, broader implications for branding.
So the downfall of VS, it really serves as this powerful real-world case study for major corporations everywhere, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's one for the textbooks.
If we look at the broader implications for branding, say in 2025 and beyond, what is the primary takeaway here about the value of representation? What's the big lesson?
The primary, most undeniable takeaway, I think, is that the market now demands diversity. And that means different sizes, different backgrounds, different gender identities. It's demanded as a prerequisite for engagement now. It's not an optional extra, not an afterthought, not some temporary trend you can ride out.
It's foundational.
It's foundational to cultural relevance today, and therefore foundational to commercial success in many sectors, especially fashion and beauty. Companies like Savage X, Fenty, Skims, Aerie, they didn't just survive in the space Victoria's Secret was struggling. They thrived.
Right. They moved right in.
They proved that inclusion is profitable. That was a crucial proof point.
That competitive contrast is perhaps the strongest indictment of the old VS model, isn't it?
It really is.
They essentially handed the market over to those who understood the consumer shift first, or who embodied it from the start.
Yeah. Those newer brands successfully aligned their commercial strategy with social progress almost instantly, or were built on it. And that made the old Victoria's Secret look not just outdated, but ethically compromised in comparison. And that leads directly to the big lesson learned, I think. For large established brands, cultural relevance is now intrinsically defined by sensitivity to social progress and by transparency about corporate values.
You can't hide anymore.
Not really. The attempted reinvention by VS is just a stark illustration of how these large established entities must align their commercial strategy directly with shifting public values, especially values concerning beauty, identity, and representation. It's essential just to survive.
In a way, this 2025 comeback, it's an attempt at maybe cultural healing. Is that too strong?
Possibly not. It's certainly an effort to mend a very broken relationship with the consumer, acknowledging, implicitly at least, that the old fantasy caused harm to many by promoting such narrow exclusivity.
Right. They're trying to reposition fashion, their fashion, as a reflection of inclusion.
Rather than a mirror of unattainable singular perfection.
Yeah.
And the ultimate measure of success for this rebrand, I suspect, won't be purely in terms of sales figures, though obviously that matters to them. It'll also be in whether the public, and especially that younger, highly influential Gen Z market, actually accepts the narrative of genuine evolution.
Can the brand truly champion diverse, authentic, female and non-binary leadership and body confidence?
Or will the ghosts of the angels, that powerful imagery, continue to overshadow this new effort? That is the ultimate test they face in 2025. It's a massive undertaking.
It's truly fascinating how the narrative of a single fashion show or its return can encapsulate such a massive societal and economic shift. It certainly raises an important question for all of us watching, doesn't it? When a brand makes such a public apology through radical change, how long do we, as consumers, give them to prove that the evolution is real, that it's structural, that it's permanent? Hashtag tag 5 outro. A profound question maybe to leave you with as you consider the challenging journey brands face when they try to truly evolve in the public eye after such a major misstep. We've synthesized a complex history, a really dramatic downfall, and now this high-stakes attempt at reinvention, all thanks to the source material available. Thank you for engaging with this exploration of the cultural landscape with us.
Yeah, we appreciate you joining us to unpack this monumental shift in the fashion world and really the economics of authenticity.
Next time on Trending Unpacked, we're diving into the haunting universe of Annabelle and why our fascination with cursed dolls refuses to die.
Until then, keep questioning the narrative.